The Patterson-Gimlin film is the most debated piece of footage ever. I have my opinion on it, and you probably do too. But I wanted to bring the opinions of the most qualified people to light. From animal and anthropology experts to special effects professionals, this is what the experts think of the most famous Bigfoot film. Grover Krantz was an American anthropologist who spent several decades researching Bigfoot. He also donated his skeleton to science after he died. Cool guy. Anyway, when he first saw stills from the Patterson-Gimlin film, he thought it was a fake. It wouldn't be until he had an opportunity to see the full film that he began to believe that Paddy, the nickname given to the Bigfoot in the film, was a real Sasquatch. After estimating the height and weight of Paddy, Krantz stated that there probably wasn't a man alive who could match the gait and size of her. His height estimate was about 6 feet 6 inches or 2 meters tall. His weight estimate was an incredible 500 pounds or 227 kilograms. He based this both on the footprints left by Paddy and the estimated size of the body. At the very least, Krantz said that if there was a man who could fit into the costume, it'd be a very well-known athlete. Krantz also pointed to the movement of the legs as evidence the film was authentic. Paddy bends its knees as if it was a short man walking fast, but as we can see, Paddy is fairly tall and walking at a comfortable pace. Krantz also thought the shoulders were far too broad for a man to fit inside if it was a costume. In his book Bigfoot Sasquatch Evidence, Krantz also discusses a report by Russian biomechanics expert Dmitry Donskoy. Donskoy said that the proportions, arm swings, and general movements of Paddy were all very natural, not like a human wearing a bulky costume. He also said that there wasn't a single man with the proportions Paddy had. Krantz noted that Donskoy worked with Soviet athletes and would be an expert on that front. Krantz concluded by saying he had gotten to know Patterson directly, and he didn't believe Patterson had the ability to pull a hoax off. Whenever Krantz tried to have a conversation about the technical details of Paddy's movements, he could tell Patterson couldn't understand him. He also noted that Patterson immediately called for search dogs after taking the film, which could have exposed him if it was a hoax. When Patterson was nearing the end of his life, he needed money for cancer treatments. But instead of trying to make a second film or further capitalizing on his first one, he spent most of his money trying to look for Bigfoot in Thailand. John Napier was a primatologist known for being an early scientist to look into Bigfoot reports. He thought that Bigfoot as a whole deserved further study, but he didn't think the Patterson-Gimlin film was legitimate. After watching the film, he concluded that the walk of the creature was consistent with a human's. Napier also thought the arm movements and general gait were the exaggerated work of a person in a suit. Although Paddy is supposedly female, he noted that the walk looked like a human male's. Due to Paddy having muscular shoulders and a thick neck, he thought that the center of gravity should be higher up. However, Paddy walked with a human-like center of gravity. He also thought the legs of Paddy were more human in appearance, while the upper half of the body was more ape-like. Napier stated that this was an unnatural fusion that couldn't exist in nature, so he concluded that one half, the upper one, was fake. Napier also looked at the size of the footprints taken after the film in comparison with Paddy's height. Height estimates of Paddy range a lot, but Napier noted that serious researchers thought it was around 6.5 to 7 feet, or about 2 meters tall. He also noted that the stride of Paddy was measured to be about 41 inches, or 104 centimeters long. He also calculated that the average stride of a person Paddy's height would only be about 30 inches, or 76 centimeters. This is another reason he thought Paddy was just a guy in a suit with an exaggerated walk. Another thing Napier noted was the presence of a large sagittal crest, something museum director Frank Beebe also pointed out. The sagittal crest in apes is used to attach extra jaw muscles to so that they can chew large amounts of plants. Based on eyewitness reports, Bigfoot's diet is mostly made of small mammals, fish, and berries. Due to this, Napier thought that a Sasquatch wouldn't need to have a sagittal crest. He also thought that Paddy should have a more protruding belly, like a gorilla's or an orangutan's. Napier said that he wasn't 100% sure it was fake, but his analysis pointed towards a hoax. Anatomist Don Grieve is a bit of an interesting case. I've seen him cited as both being in favor and against the Patterson Gimlin film's legitimacy. Grieve's main point of contention was what speed the camera was at. You see, Patterson's camera recorded at both 18 and 24 frames per second. At 24 frames per second, the speed and movements of Paddy match up with a human, in Grieve's opinion. At 18 frames per second, however, the movements are more unnatural. Patterson usually recorded at 24 frames per second, but sometime after he took the film, he found that he had switched his camera to 18 frames per second. There is some debate, but what speed the film was taken at is unknown. Cryptozoology analyst and paleontologist Darren Naish was also skeptical of the film. He noted that visually the PGF fell into a gray zone. It's blurry enough to not be easily dismissed as a hoax, but not clear enough to prove Bigfoot exists. Due to this, Naish focused largely on the story around the Patterson Gimlin film and noted some interesting details. One point brought up in favor of the film's authenticity is that Paddy is a female. Why, if they were hoaxing it, would they think of making Paddy a female? Naish pointed out that Patterson had previously interviewed a Bigfoot witness named William Rowe. Rowe had also seen a female Bigfoot, and Patterson even sketched it, which explains where the idea could have come from. This topic was also discussed by skeptics Daniel Loxton and Donald Prothero, who go further and state that Paddy seems to heavily resemble what Rowe described. Of course, that could be because both Rowe and Patterson saw real female Sasquatches, but it could also be where Patterson got his design from. Naish also thought that one reason attempts to recreate the suit failed was because they couldn't recreate the circumstances of the Patterson Gimlin film. He thought that, maybe, the amount of light that day was just right to make the suit look good. Anthropologist Jeff Meldrum is another major proponent of the Patterson Gimlin film being real. He worked with a computer animator named Ruben Steindorf to try and recreate Paddy in 3D. Meldrum noted that Paddy's stooped walking was consistent with a large animal carrying a lot of upper body weight. His associate Doug Hijek also noted a curious mass on Paddy's thigh. He and Meldrum theorized that it was a muscle hernia. Meldrum also pointed out that the hernia flexed and receded at the exact points of Paddy's walk as it would on a real leg. His colleague, Dr. Nelson of the Idaho State Health Professionals faculty agreed. The doctor added that it would have been very difficult to fake, as at the time, our knowledge of muscles wasn't as advanced. Meldrum also talked with computer animator Kyle Council, who said that Paddy's walk wasn't human, but human-like. Paddy walked like an animal that was used to carrying a lot of weight, not like a guy in a bulky costume. Council also notes that the upper body muscles looked natural and were connected to each other. In his conclusion, Council echoes Krantz and says, "The boundaries of the human form do not even fit within the form of the creature." Finally, Meldrum talked to a bodybuilder who pointed out that Paddy's muscles were massive, even for a very muscular person. He said that the only guy with shoulder muscles that size was prime Arnold Schwarzenegger. The trapezius muscles of Paddy's neck were also noted to be massive, larger than even bodybuilders who specifically worked on them. Bigfoot investigator John Green discussed the PGF with Ken Peterson, a special effects artist who worked at Disney. He said that they wouldn't be able to recreate the film in live action, and if they wanted to, they would have to animate it. Peterson also dismissed the possibility of it being an animatronic. Disney's animatronics were all attached to a ground device and couldn't walk around freely. Green was then directed to Janos Prohaska, a stuntman and ape costume designer. Prohaska didn't think that the suit could have had heavy padding, as it showed the movement of muscles. It would have to be skin tight in order to show this movement, and nobody was big enough to match Patty's dimensions. He added that if it was a costume, it was the best he'd ever seen. Green also pointed out that several years after the PGF was taken, a film production company tried to make their own Bigfoot suit for a documentary. Needless to say, it didn't look as good as Patty. Stan Winston, known for doing the special effects for Jurassic Park, was not in favor of the film's authenticity. He thought that the length of the arms and legs were the same as a human's would be. He also thought that the hair on Patty looked artificial, or at least artificially glued onto a costume. Interestingly, Bernard Heuvelmans, cryptozoology's founder, also thought the hair looked fake. Winston thought that you could have easily made a costume as good for about $1,000 in 1967 money with that day's technology and materials. This has led to people criticizing him for not trying to recreate the costume himself, but he was probably busy with making Jurassic Park. Bill Munns is a special effects artist who's worked on films like Swamp Thing and The Beastmaster. He released an absolutely massive book called When Roger Met Patty, where he argues that Patty was a real Bigfoot. One interesting theory he came up with after examining the footage was that Patty was fatty, not muscular. He thought you could see clear signs of fat flabs on Patty's back. Furthermore, he believed that this would have been even harder to fake with the 1960s tech than muscles would have been. In the 1960s, fat was made using either foamed latex or polyurethane foam. Munns pointed out that these foam materials didn't look very good in motion and wouldn't have actually looked like fat. He also asked, if it was a costume, why would they design it to be flabby instead of muscular and scary? Munns also noted that the costumes of the 1960s didn't look nearly as good as Patty. Films like Planet of the Apes and 2001: A Space Odyssey had ape-man costumes that weren't nearly as realistic. Even if Patterson did have access to a Hollywood costume maker, a suit of that type would be extremely unique for the era. Most ape suits were either made for comedy or to scare people, so a large female Bigfoot would be very unprecedented. Munns had also worked with chimpanzees during his movie career, and he thought that Patty's fur pattern looked like a real primate's fur. The way Patty's hair went from thick to thin looked very natural, and would be tough to pull off for a suit designer. Due to the limits of 1960s costume technology, Munns concluded that Patty had to be a real Bigfoot. Rick Baker, best known for his work on the movie Harry and the Hendersons, was also skeptical of the PGF. He and his friend Bob Burns, who was an ape actor, were sent the tape to see if they could provide expertise. During an interview with cryptozoology investigator Mark Chorvinsky, Burns said, "I put it on my moviola and we went back and forth with it and went frame by frame. We gave it a really good and an honest shot, we really did. We projected it over and over, and our honest opinion, from having worked in gorilla suits, was that it was a guy in a suit." Burns and Baker also thought they saw a costume technique called a water bag in the video. A water bag is essentially a fake stomach placed in an ape suit that makes it look like real moving flesh. Baker also thought that the fur looked cheap and fake. Chorvinsky also interviewed a number of other special effects artists who were skeptical of the film. John Vulich of Babylon 5 and Buffy the Vampire Slayer said that Patty's neck movements looked stiff to him, as if it was a suit. In his words, "There's no doubt in my mind that it's a guy in a suit." I find it interesting that the Patterson-Gimlin film still inspires debate. Even some skeptics don't go as far as to completely discount it or claim they can 100% tell it's fake. Hopefully this video got you thinking about it in more detail. After hearing the arguments from both sides, what do you think? Big thank you to my Patreons Gerhard, Jason, John, Timothy, Mackindude, and Wildworld. If you'd like to support me, a link to my Patreon will be in the description. Liking and subscribing also helps a bunch. I'd also like to thank Lazy Cowboy, Pondicherry, and Serp for helping out. That's all for this video, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.